Welcome to REST, which stands for Resiliency and Empowerment Seminar today. I'm Susan Gans and I am your host. I am the founder and strategic advisor with Gans Strategic Solutions, where we operate at the intersection of business and human behavior. This show is about highlighting the profiles of leaders and nonprofits, as well as small, mid-sized businesses. We hear about the journeys of these leaders, as well as how they're being resilient and empowering others during this particularly difficult time. I'm so delighted today to have our guest, Wendy Longwood. Wendy is the Chief Operating Officer for Dress for Success Worldwide, and she joined the organization in 2017. She oversees the design and implementation of processes and infrastructure to allow Dress for Success to fulfill its mission as a global leader in women's and economic empowerment, and in so doing, help women around the world gain confidence, tools, and resources to succeed professionally and in life. And to this work, Wendy brings general management experience spanning the nonprofit, public, and private sectors, with a particular emphasis on organizational strategy and operations in dynamic growth environments. Prior to joining Dress for Success, Wendy was COO of Silicon Audio, a startup engineering company in Austin, Texas, where she built out and managed the business infrastructure to support the commercialization of the company's technologies. She previously worked in consulting through her own consultancy, as well as vice president of client services for JVA Consulting, a Denver-based firm specializing in social impact and entrepreneurism. Wendy holds a MBA from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern and a bachelor's degree from Haverford College, and she lives in New York City. Welcome to our show.
Thank you, Susan. It's a delight to be with you today.
Thank you so much. So let's deep dive and hear about your journey to being Chief Operating Officer. How did that happen?
That's a great question. I'm still not entirely sure. I think my career trajectory has been a pretty interesting one and has evolved pretty fluidly over the course of my career. And it takes, I think, being reflective and then seeing the strings that kind of, led me to where I am now. I was a philosophy religion major in college, so it was definitely not I'm going to go be a philosopher when I graduate kind of a situation. I knew that I wanted to be in New York City when I graduated college, but I didn't really have a concrete vision for what my vocation would look like, what career path I would take. And after a pretty substantial amount of time not finding a job, I randomly kind of stumbled into a bookstore, picked up a book, and it was a book that was about unconventional career paths and things that you can do that are not kind of the norm. It wasn't going and being a paralegal, which a lot of my philosophy peers were doing to kind of check out the law sector. And I found a nonprofit in there in New York City that was kind of a combination of like a Peace Corps in the city and youth development, and it worked all over New York City. And I was like, that's the one. That's where I'm going. And when I look back on that career step now, what I see there is the same thing that has drawn me to every job that I've taken since then. And that was that wherever I worked, they had to be doing something, whether it's a service organization, whether it's even the engineering company where I worked most recently, they had to be doing something that I could get behind, that I could feel passionate about, what the product or service or mission was of that organization, and that they were delivering on it. And in tandem with that I could at least now help shape that direction, and certainly at that time have a concrete line of sight to that impact. So I think what I was recognizing was this disconnect in all these interviews I've been going on with, not seeing that kind of line of sight to what my impact would be and my ability to kind of shape direction. And when I look back now, I can see that what resonated in that very first job has been a theme throughout my entire career, and has been some of the metrics by which I gauge the choices I make in moving to the next job, moving to the next position. So what seemed kind of arbitrary at the time, literally stumbling upon a book in a used bookstore, now I can see how that was a part of finding a piece of finding what matters to me in how I developed my professional journey.
So it sounds like having an impact is a core value for you, one that you and I share. What are your other core values that drive you personally and professionally?
That's such a good question. So obviously, impact, as we said, and having passion about what it is that you're doing in your organization. I mean, obviously right now, and I know we'll talk more about Dress for Success, but I believe just incredibly passionately in the mission of the organization. I think just stepping back, I think for people to be truly impactful in the areas in which they work, there has to be an alignment between, what you believe in and who you are as a person with how you show up and deliver in your workplace. So I think the word authenticity is, just become sort of it's bandied about a lot now, but I think that's incredibly important to me, so that I'm bringing my complete self and my best self to my work environment, and that I'm living and showing up and leading in a way that aligns with my own personal, ethos or who I am. And that's really important to me. So I think that's authenticity. I think it's integrity. I think it's, as my career has grown, and I think the more, kind of senior positions you take, the more you have to step into situations that are fluid, situations that are ambiguous, situations where there's a lot of unknown, and be comfortable living in that space. And that's something that I've really had to learn to embrace versus try to control, because you can't. And right now, in the environment that we're living in, is certainly showcasing that the world will change in ways that you cannot anticipate, and you have to adapt and find ways to thrive in those periods of ambiguity.
Yeah, so let's pick up on that point of change. I always say that change is a constant. When I think about all just different changes, going from a landline phone to how we use a mobile phone today, which is really a smart device, right? So tell me about how you navigate change and bring others along on the change journey.
Yeah, so I think it's a few things, and I'll take Dress for Success right now as an example. So Dress for Success Worldwide, we, as you mentioned, we're an organization that is fundamentally about helping women attain financial independence and economic empowerment. We're a little over 22 years old now, and what started off as this really scrappy organization in a church basement with all volunteers is now a worldwide organization in 25 countries, over 140 affiliates operating under the Dress for Success brand. And worldwide, where I sit, is the entity that sort of manages that affiliate network. Dress for Success has historically always been a very tactile organization. That its origins were in helping women who had employment interviews coming up find the suits to dress the part, so that they had confidence going into an interview that allowed them to then get the job that they needed to put them on the path to financial independence. Since that time, there's been a whole host of other programming related to financial education and job advancement and career advancement and leadership and all these other elements that are what truly takes a woman from getting that job to really thriving professionally and thriving in life. But the piece that's been a constant and is often the first entry point for Dress for Success is the suiting program, which is bricks and mortar, which is women coming into an appointment and meeting with someone who's going to understand what kind of interview they're going on and what environment that company is in, what sector that company is in, so that they work with them to find the right look, to build their confidence, to go over the interview prep, to give feedback. And all of those things have always been very face-to-face and very personalized. Yes. And even the programs that evolve out and that kind of, beyond that first interview piece have been cohort-based programs of getting groups of women together, which we know, and all the data now shows us that kind of core small groups of women's networks are what women really need to thrive and to advance and work. And all of a sudden COVID happens, and there is no face-to-face, and there is no bricks and mortar, and this is worldwide. And we went from having, less than 5% of our affiliates offering any kind of virtual programming to 90% offering some kind of virtual programming within the first few weeks of shutting down. That was dramatic. If anyone had said that we would be looking at that scenario or moving to that, and we have actually been since I've been there 3.5 years now, 4.5 years, because it preceded me. We have been developing a digital component to this. We had to go from, all of these years of developing it, thinking, how do we get buy-in on this? How are we going to bring the elements that make us successful to the virtual stage? All of this work, and instead, when necessity demands it, you have to pivot. You have to radically rethink how you do what you do in a different way. And, in this instance, I think because everything else was changing, the change element was almost easier in a way, although the obstacles were huge, but there was no option. I think that now, reflectively is probably the easiest way to change, because other kinds of change where you have to bring along when you're sitting comfortably in your own previous way of doing things, I think is a lot harder. That's where you need the buy-in. That's where you need, everyone to kind of be in the space of having the conversation about changing. And there's a little bit of dragging and pulling of people along the path to change. So in some very strange ways, COVID has enabled us to advance and do some unique and innovative things that would have taken a lot longer in ordinary times. It's been quite a wild road.
I bet. And how were you able to successfully move forward? I know that necessity required it, but I could still imagine that people are in different stages of accepting the situation. And then there's still some work that needs to be done about getting people on board and navigating a situation that nobody's ever been faced with, like we have been faced with, given all these technological advancements, which are to our advantage. But how do you think you were able to move so quickly? What was the secret ingredient?
Commitment to our women, frankly. We were not going to, with the compounding, it's not just that COVID kind of impacted everyone in health, but it disproportionately impacted women in so many different ways. And the women that we serve who are already often on that precipice of kind of right at poverty line, or just that one health crisis or that one emergency can kind of throw you into a tailspin financially or economically for your household. It was our imperative to kind of be there and to respond. some of the things that we did that again, I think not have been quite as possible in a previous setting is that historically, because we operate this licensed network of affiliates that are licensees actually of Dress for Success worldwide, they own their own kind of programming that they deliver there. And that's intentional, because what women need in Kathmandu and Rapid City, South Dakota are different from what's needed in New York. So while there are pillars, while there are constructs that are what we deliver in common, how you implement that in your community has to do with your community and with the culture in which you operate. And so there was great autonomy in delivery of programming. What we at Worldwide took on when this shift happened was we will create digital programming and you can plug into it. And so there were some affiliates that were able to bring online their own digital programming relatively quickly, but they augmented it with what we were delivering. And some of our affiliates, especially our smaller affiliates, they just kind of plugged into what we were able to offer. So we were able to expand the reach and footprint of what we could do pretty easily by kind of expanding how we did it to be more centralized versus a very decentralized model. And I would say too that the first several weeks, if not the first couple of months of programming, was all about responding to what people were going to. It's a lot of kind of not health, but just sort of self-care and how do you balance this new world that you find yourself into? If you've just lost your job, what are the things you need to do right now to help mitigate the financial impacts? So immediately it was almost intervention types of things. Let's take you where you are now and provide you with what you need and answer the questions that you have right now. And as this crisis has broadened, and we're now on, I don't know, month 5,000 of COVID, we're reshifting back to our traditional pillars, and we know so many people are out of work now. So job seeking in this new client, or new climate and climate speak. So that's kind of where we've gone to now. But first, I think it was centralized, and then allowing the flexibility for our affiliates to plug in and to offer this to their own constituents easily and readily, creating networks of community, and delivering content that was time appropriate, time and context appropriate.
Yes, it sounds like you led with empathy and really listening to your community, and then empowering the local communities to tailor the programming to what they needed locally.
Yeah.
And serving the women that you seek to serve. So that is wonderful. And I'm sure it's been a wild ride of, when technology works, it's wonderful. And when it doesn't work, it's not so wonderful. And
exactly.
And we've all been there. So it's good to have that sense of humor too, to say, hey, we all experience this. Even people who do this for a living, right, in the media have also experienced the technical difficulties.
Dogs run in, the doorbell rings, I have construction outside. And that's just today.
And this is real life, and I think that's also what makes it relatable, and these programs relatable, because we're not living in a box, truly. We're living our lives where there's the integration of that personal life and the professional life, which brings me to a question that I'm curious about, is how do you either for yourself or mentor others around that integration of the personal life and the professional life, especially now when the lines are truly blurred?
Yeah, that's always such a hard, it's a hard thing to try to coach people to do, I think. Personally, I know that I am at my best when I'm also taking care of myself. So it's interesting. I've lived all over the country. My family is all over the country. My friends are all over the country. So I travel a lot. So this has been really hard for me, not being able to kind of have my normal means of rejuvenating with traveling and being part of it. But for me, it's during this time, but just in general, it's making sure that I'm taking the time that's truly away, even with phones and every ability to stay connected. I try when I'm on vacation, I try to do a hard stop. I try to do hard stops, at night, so that I can rest my brain. I start mulling things over in that way, and I think I'm smarter. I am more efficient when it's just not 24/7. But yet I know, and I see this in friends and I see this in colleagues, feeling an obligation to be 100% on all the time. And I worry a lot about burnout, and I really try to encourage my teams not just to take time, but when they're taking the time to truly disconnect. We actually in May of this year, we were really worried about our teams burning out. And so we decided to do, in early May, we said, you know what, everyone gets a May Day. A May Day is whatever day, you just need to tell us what day it is, and we're gonna send out, and nobody's allowed to email you that day, nobody can call you that day, you're off the grid. And every one of our employees picked a day, and it was just such a unexpected, kind of opportunity to disconnect and take care of yourself in the midst of all of this, even if that meant sitting and wearing your pajamas all day long and watching, binge watching something on Netflix. But everyone just took that day, and we recognized how beneficial that was for our staff. And actually about 2 or 3 weeks after that, right after kind of the end of May, or toward the end of May, we decided to readjust schedules so that we're only working on Monday, Thursday through this summer, through this period, so that people really have that time to disconnect, time to rejuvenate, time to focus on self, time to find balance. Because I think that that's just so vital. I know that personally for me, and I think for everyone, you have to carve out your boundaries, because they'll rarely be imposed on you by someone else. So you have to kind of defend them for yourself.
Absolutely agreed about the boundaries, and sometimes that's hard to do because sometimes, I know for me, I have felt at times guilty about the boundaries, and then I remind myself of what you said so beautifully a few minutes ago about you're at your best when you're taking care of yourself. And that's something that I share a lot with people, is like, if you're not at your best, you can't serve the people that you're intending to, whether that's your family, your clients, your friends, your community. It's really challenging. So always great reminders about the boundaries. And that brings me to a point about empowerment, because that's very empowering. So what are you doing to empower yourself and others besides the boundaries?
I was going to say, I think it goes to, in our work, because it is around empowering the women we serve, we do have also a responsibility to lead by example in some regard, right? I think ultimately, and this goes back to some of what, I think drew me to Dress for Success, and has been part of how I try to show up. And that is that you have to find the unique pieces of you and embrace them. You have to bring those to what you do, and you have to honor them, and you have to strengthen them and grow them. I'm a big believer in strengths-based leadership and strengths-based management. And I think so much of what Dress for Success does is, it's never been about clothing, although that's kind of what comes to mind. It's like, oh yeah, I give you all of my stuff. It's never been about clothes. It's about confidence, and it's about finding and feeling self-worth, and maybe rediscovering that. It's about, kind of the rekindling joy of life and joy of possibility. And all those things, you look at little kids who think they can do everything and to embrace everything and have this zeal. And if you can help women, or even within yourself, kind of recapture those bits of it with the pieces that help you rejuvenate, and with the choices you make around your career and having passion for that. And so that there's a purpose behind showing up every day, not just a paycheck. I think those are all pieces of what we hope that the women that come through our programs find, through the camaraderie and the support they find with the other women going through our programs, because that network building and community is such a huge part of what I think we deliver on. Which ironically has been another thing that we've really discovered during this time, is so many people were coming to these sessions online because they just wanted that community. And I think our previous construct for how we delivered virtual stuff was almost an individual learning route. And now we're rethinking that entirely because of this situation and because of responding to what we're seeing people want out of what we do. And that's community, and that's peer validation, and all these kind of amazing things that happen when you bring groups of women together and they support each other.
Yes, and isn't it wonderful that you can connect truly worldwide with the women, and they can do that with each other, and also see that they're not going through it alone, and it's not isolated to their one community. There's common themalities, and that's what I always enjoy about talking to people across the country or across the world, is really seeing, wow, you're experiencing that too. The world is smaller and I'm not alone, and we can rely on each other to give strength and encouragement and learn from one another. So that is truly wonderful. And when I think about Dress for Success, I also think about the terms mentorship and sponsorship. Can you talk about the difference and the importance of having both mentors and sponsors in your career?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I feel like I've been really lucky in that I've worked for amazing women. And I think that's a big, that's been a big part of what drew me to Dress Success and choosing to re-enter nonprofit space through this organization after being out of it for a while. But I think mentorships, in my mind, and the women that I think of mentors to me, are the ones who give just really good advice. They're the ones that I go to. They're my sounding board. They are the ones that I watch and I hope to aspire to. It's so funny. I moved back to New York to take this job a few years ago, and I had an opportunity to go out to brunch with a woman that I had worked with very, very early in my career. I think my second job, and I'd always held her up as a mentor, even though I didn't even directly report to her, but I worked closely with her, and I just thought she was so amazing. And I had an opportunity to go out to lunch with her and just say, somebody said, one of my reports said something to me one day, and in my head I said to myself, I've achieved Robin. Like that was my mentor, and I always loved the way in which she responded to things, and I loved the way that she kind of conducted herself in times of challenge. And the feedback that I had gotten was the way in which I always thought she operated, and that was my highest kind of achievement, was to somehow aspire to be even close to what I got out of her. So I think that to me is mentorship. I think sponsorship is the kind of proactive. You need advocates. You need someone actually pushing you on the path to the next steps in your career. They are putting you up for promotions. They are challenging you to take new projects. They are actively helping to maneuver you to the next stages. I think that embracing change is challenging, but it's how you move the needle. It's how you grow individually. It can be easy to kind of sit in a safe space, in a comfortable space, and perform really well. But I think that sponsors are those that kind of pluck you out of comfort and help to propel you into the next stages where you are pushed further and where you have an opportunity to grow and evolve your careers. And that's what makes a career. That's what makes this strange journey of so many of my peers, where it's not been linear. It's not it's not even in the same sector. It's just a zig and a zag. And in my head, when you look back on it, it makes perfect sense at the time, and probably to outsiders, it's like, how did you end up there? But that's part of it.
Yes, and it's also having those mentors to bounce off. Well, this opportunity presented itself, and it's not this linear thing. And is it okay? And what are your thoughts on
Yeah.
it, to help round out your thinking on that? And maybe it's an opportunity that's happening for you. And then you're right about the sponsors. It is those advocates that are going to talk about you when you're not in the room and help lift you up. And that's also very important to nurture. So in closing, a couple of last questions for you. What would you like people to remember about our conversation today?
So right now, I have on my bathroom mirror where I post random stuff. I have something that I grabbed off of actually Instagram, and the shortened version of it, the mantra that I now kind of have been using recently is to change the input. And for me, what that means is that, there's kind of that old adage, like, be the change you wish to see in the world. And I think that there's no time in recent times in my lifetime that has been more about that than right now. And we're in a space of change, and that also creates a space of opportunity. And whether it's societal change, whether it's, organizational change, whether it is personal development and personal growth and achieving individual goals, you need to look at what you're putting into it if you want to see something different coming out of it, and be strategic and take risks. And so I find myself kind of just saying, change the input a lot as I'm thinking about what's the next decision to be made. Can I think out of the box? Can I look at this from a different perspective? And I often, when encountered with sort of crazy things that must be achieved in a workforce or workplace, I ask, what would it take to make this happen before just going to a yes or a no? Because I want to understand, is it even possible, and what would it take? What are the inputs? So right now, my thing is change the input.
So I love that. I am now going to adapt that one, change the input. So Wendy, how can we find you and Dress for Success if people want to reach out and learn more?
Absolutely. We absolutely would love for people to engage with our organization. Our main website is dressforsuccess.org. You can find your local affiliate. You can donate, which we desperately want people to do. You can sign up to volunteer and see what we're about. And we also, just in terms of our response to COVID and how we're navigating through the current situation, we created a small microsite, and that's dfsmovingforward.org. And that's a very great, simple way of understanding who we are, what we're doing now in response to COVID, and how we're taking the steps to be first responders of the next wave of this crisis, which is the economic crisis and the job crisis.
Beautiful. And I'm going to repeat that. So that's dressforsuccess.org. You can find out more about the programs. You can donate. You can volunteer. And in response to COVID, they've created the microsite called DFS, obviously Dress for Success, movingforward.org. Wendy, this has been such an impactful conversation, motivating conversation for me. Thank you so much for your time and your insights. And to your audience, I hope that you are inspired by Change the Input and be empowered to bring your best self to whatever work and personal work that you're doing. Until the next conversation.